Namaste and greetings. I, Remat, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, would like to extend my warmest welcome to you to IMPRI #Web Policy Learning. We are gathered here for the sixth day of Ending Gender-Based Violence Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance, an online national spring school program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course. This training program is organized by #IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center. The chair for this program is Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, visiting distinguished professor at IMPRI, New Delhi. This program has an excellent panel of experts who will be sharing their expertise for the duration of their program. The distinguished expert panel includes Advocate Dr. Flavia Agnes ji, Advocate Dr. Albertina Almeida ji, Dr. Vahida Nainar ji, Professor Vijay Lakshmi Nanda ji, Professor Vinay Vaswani ji, Miss Anju Dubey Pandey ji, Dr. Padma Diostali ji, Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Advocate Celine Thomas ji, Professor Saumya Uma ji, Dr. Keerthi Bollineni ji, Advocate Audrey De Mello ji, Miss Nandini Sarkar ji, and Mr. Harish Sadani ji. The panel of conveners comprises of Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, Professor Gumadi Sridevi ji, Dr. Simi Mehta ji, and Dr. Arjun Kumar ji. Continuing with our commitment to fostering awareness and actionable insights, I extend a warm welcome to all participants engaging in this crucial discourse on ending gender-based violence. I express gratitude for your keen interest and dedication in investing time, energy, and effort toward comprehending the intricate landscape of policies and governance surrounding this pervasive issue. Your participation plays a pivotal role in uniting practitioners and enthusiasts alike, creating a collaborative space for impactful policy research and advocacy. Thank you for your invaluable contribution to this transformative course. We have also shared the course outline and reading resources in your email for your kind perusal. Before we start today's session, I would like to remind the housekeeping announcements once again. Please join the meeting on time. There will be a Q&A session after each presentation. Share your questions on the Q&A box. The questions must not be posted as an anonymous attendee. Ensure that your questions are precise. Refrain from making general comments in the question to save time. Now, without any further ado, let us start our program. It is my honor and privilege to invite the chair for the program, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to start the program with her opening chair remarks. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Rahmat, for your introduction. And I would like to, first of all, welcome Professor Saumya Uma, Dr. Keerthi Bollineni, and Dr. Shalu Nigam, today's resource person. And I express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Arjun Kumar, Dr. Simi Mehta, Ms. Vaishali Singh, Ms. Priyanka Negi, Shri Satyam Tripathi, and Ms. Vithita for putting this course together. So far, we have, in previous 5 days, we have dwelled on role of women's rights movement in preventing gender-based violence, taking up a particular issue such as dowry or domestic violence or sexual harassment at workplace. We have also had experiential account of empowering women and girls across their lifetime by and various measures which the state and the civil society has taken. And still, when we face gender-based violence, which is increasing day by day, what kind of institutional support the survivors of gender-based violence take, though it was the first kind of feminist intervention happened in the 80s, and women's groups started providing institutional support in terms of counseling and hand-holding of the survivors to rebuild their life. Now we have seen that so many states have also taken up responsibility of starting one-stop crisis center. More than 6 states in the union territories in our country have either hospital-based support system or hospital becomes the nodal agency for support to the survivors. And we have also seen in Andhra Pradesh where there's a community-based one-stop crisis center, and some of the illustrious examples and the best practices were discussed in the previous sessions. Engaging with men, this thing came out again and again, that if we are only empowering girls and women, and the perpetrators are still at large, and the ideology of misogyny and the rape culture is not questioned, then we can't achieve much. And that's why after the 2013 Nirbhaya tragedy, women's groups and human rights organizations have started engaging, and even community-based organizations are discussing this issue of gender-based violence with boys and men. Another very important thing that emerged in the previous 5 days of discussion was that it is important to have women in decision making at leadership level in the criminal justice system. In fact, the legal hands-on by Dr. Shalu Nigam brought in so many important national level data based on what is the decision making power that women hold in the criminal justice system and other apex bodies of all spheres. In fact, the slogan of Me Too movement was more women in more powerful position. That's the only way of stopping or challenging very toxic masculinity and also misogynistic power, which is used against the people who are powerless. And here we are not talking only about women and girls, but also boys and queer community. They are also at the receiving end of this kind of misogyny. Yesterday, very, very sensitive portrayal and the first-hand accounts by all three resource persons, first about what is happening to the queer life, how our queer community facing varied forms of violence, why it happens, where it happens, and what kind of responses have been there. After that, Dr. Celine Thomas's lecture, because she's a practicing lawyer in Bangalore, and she also told about the 5 locations of gender-based violence and what kind of remedies do we have. And it also emerged that it is very important to provide the supporting the local women's organization, community-based organization, and a continuous gender sensitization program, legal awareness program. In fact, from Rituparnaji's statement, it happened that so many queer persons don't even know what their rights are. They don't even know about the latest the law that is also very inadequate in 2019 transgender persons protection of rights law, which is also highly inadequate. But even about that, there is not much awareness. So it is very important that today's lecture is going to be very important because it's also showing that what kind of networking was done for effective campaign building and to reckon with the multifaceted dimensions of violence. Networking at local, national, global level is a must. And that's what the women's movement has done right from day one. In any cultural context, patriarchal control over women's sexuality, fertile labor, and labor manifests itself in a physical and psychological violence against relatively powerless section. I won't say it's only women, but children, women, ethnic minorities, oppressed castes, religious minorities, they all face this kind of violence. And we have had ample examples in last 5-6 years of global geopolitical upheavals that we have had. We need to contextualize gender violence within this ideological matrix, and so that we can identify forces with whom we need to network. And in every section of society, due to multiplicity of contradictory discourses, women's movement has managed to find its tactical short-term allies at the same time without diluting the perspective. A very patriarchal husband may turn out to be a compassionate brother or father who is prepared to stake his all to get justice for the victimized sister or daughter. And we all have seen in our own families, no, the double standards that men in our family have is when it comes to daughter and sister, and when it comes to wife. This can become an entry point, for negotiation. The younger generation of men who have grown with the women's movement are attuned to women's rights perspective, honest and sincere, hardworking and altruistic elements within the state apparatus, such as police or judges or administrative officers or medical social workers or psychiatrists, who are also social workers and personnel officers in the corporate world, have supported women's rights organizations on a case-to-case basis while dealing with the individual cases of violence and by sponsoring their campaigns. So many of them have taken initiative in organizing gender training programs in their institutions. We saw saw, so right from 1980s, like so many corporate houses, when they have their, and even public sector enterprises, they have included gender-based violence in their, and also safety at workplace in their syllabi for the staff development program. So effective and purposeful networking with all these elements can result in making the campaigns against gender violence more meaningful, and by bringing immediate changes in women's lives. Now, today we have this three resource persons: Professor Saumya Uma, who has been in the women's movement for over 3 decades; Dr. Keerthi Bollineni, who has done a pioneering work of providing institutional support to women survivors of domestic violence as well as societal violence, and Dr. Shalu Nigam, who brings in the legal experience, the experiences in the court and in the criminal justice system. I think are going to make and enrich our understanding and insight on this topic. Over to IMPRI.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for your thorough recap of yesterday's events and your guidance as we embark on today's session. On that note, I'm delighted to invite Professor Saumya Umaji, Professor, Jindal Global Law School and Director, Center for Women's Rights, for an address on contribution of women's rights movement in addressing gender-based violence. Over to you, ma'am, if you could kindly take over from here.
I hope the screen is visible.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me for today's program. It's, as usual, it's always great to hear Professor Vibhuti Patel and, her recap of what has the discussion that has happened so far in the last 5 days, which also gave me a context. I'm actually having severe cold, so I hope my voice is audible, and I apologize in advance if in between I cough or I sneeze. Can you tell me how much time I have?
25 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes for presentation, and then
Okay.
Q&A.
Okay. So let me just time myself. It's 6:15 now, so say up to 6:40, right?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So thank you all. The topic that I will be speaking on today is contributions of Indian women's movements in addressing gender-based violence. I gather from Professor Vibhuti Patel's summary that you have discussed women's movements from the 80s particularly, and related to domestic violence, rape, sexual harassment at workplace. Now in my PPT, I'm actually going to go back a little bit and try and engage a little bit with the history of the Indian women's movements in addressing gender-based violence. And it's possible that I may not have enough time to deal with the contemporary aspects, but that is fine because I think you have already been discussing the contemporary issues, including, state repression or Me Too movement and so on. So I'm going to take us back a little bit in history. Yeah. So let's start with why, why it's important to know about the Indian women's movement and its engagement with gender-based violence. One is, of course, it gives a sense of history, a sense of belonging. It also gives us a sense of context to the laws and policies that we deal with today. So whether it is Section 498A IPC, or it is the Domestic Violence Act, there is a context to it, there is a history to it, and it's important to know the history because that will inform the manner in which we understand the laws and policies and how we engage with it. Also, it helps us understand issues raised on gender-based violence. How was it raised? What were the kind of strategies? What were the opposition? What were the kind of achievements, and so on. The Indian women's movement and its engagement also gives us a sense of the widespread or the broad-based nature of participation, because otherwise we may only be aware of isolated incidents or isolated campaigns or demonstrations and so on. But knowing about this gives us a sense of the widespread nature of participation within the Indian women's movements. Also, as we discuss some of these issues historically, we will find that there are many linkages from the past to the present. And when I say past to the present, I'm not talking about just the last 20 years or 30 years, but I'm talking even about the last 100 years or 150 years. We see that some of the issues that we probably take for granted today, some of the rights that we take for granted today are rights that our foremothers actually fought for very in a very concerted manner. And in another sense, we see that some of the issues that were that were highlighted or that were demands in the even 1800s, we see that some of those issues persist in society, and these are very rife kind of issues even now. So, of course, we know that the women's movement has no beginning or end, and individual resistance to subordination of women. And here, when I say women, I throughout the presentation, when I say women, I'm broadly defining women, including queer, trans women as well. So individual resistance then led to collective protests, collective campaigning, and it is those collective ways of resistance, collective ways of raising issues that we are really going to look at. Feminist scholars who have written about the women's movements in India, they say that there are basically four quite distinct phases in the movement. The first phase is the social reform movement, which is 1800s to the early 1900s. The nationalist movement, which was early 1900s, till about 1947 or so on. The post-independence era, which started from 1947 onwards, up to or just kind of spilling over to the emergency, and subsequently the post-emergency or the contemporary period, which is 1977 onwards to the present. And one interesting aspect for us to note is that gender-based violence is a common thread among all these phases. In some phases, it may have been dealt with directly. In some phases, a little indirectly. The strategies may have changed, the demands may have changed, but gender-based violence as an issue to be engaged with is a common thread among all these phases. One of the first issues that we look at is the agitation against sati, and roughly this is from the years 1815 to 1840. Some of these pictures that I have put in the PPT are from, these are taken from Radha Kumar's History of Doing. This particular picture that you see on the screen is an early, probably 20th century drawing of a sati, and the artist is unknown. It is said that in the year 1817 alone, around 700 widows were burnt alive on the funeral pyre of their husbands. This is just to give us a sense of the magnitude of this practice. Of course, there was a vociferous campaign against sati, and this was led by Raja Ram Mohan Roy, which I'm sure many of us are aware of. And one of the strategies or the argument that was used in this campaign was that sati has no shastric sanction, because those who supported sati, they tried to draw support from the Hindu religious texts. So the opposition actually argued that sati had no such religious sanction in the Hindu religious texts. The outcome of this particular campaign was that it forced the British to overcome the reluctance, the initial reluctance that the British had to enact a law. And this was the Sati Abolition Act 1829. 11 years later, because of the conservative groups, the pro-Sati groups, putting pressure on the government, there was a distinction made between voluntary and forced sati, and this was made in order to appease conservative forces. One of the other issues that we look at during the first phase is the widow remarriage. And this is in the early 1850s or so, when this particular issue was taken up for a campaign. I'm sure all of us are aware of the kind of social isolation, the kind of marginalization, the kind of harassment, stripping of dignity that is done to widows in the name of, again, religion, in the name of customs, in the name of tradition, and so on. So this particular campaign, which was intended at recognizing widow remarriage through the law, and primarily to bring up the issue of treatment of widows, the ill treatment of widows, in fact, in society. This particular campaign was led by I.C. Vidyasagar. And the strategies again were to argue that that widow remarriage was accepted in the Hindu scriptures, and there was something called Marry a Widow campaign, which was initiated. The outcome of this particular campaign was that there was a Widow Remarriage Act in 1856, which replaced the old British law, which banned widow remarriage. However, we see that law is not or legal amendments are not a solution to all problems. And one example is the Widow Remarriage Act, because even after the 1856 enactment, we saw that very few marriages actually resulted from it, because of the mindset of society, because of patriarchy, because of the emphasis on women's virginity and chastity and all of that. So even those marriages, widow marriages that took place, were mostly of virgin widows. So that was something that we saw. We see that the treatment of widows from the 1800s remains a contemporary issue as well. And this is an example of how, despite the fact that we are talking about, 2 centuries almost, we see that this particular issue continues to be something of contemporary relevance. The picture that I've put here on the slide is about the neglected widows of Vrindavan in UP. And we see that the same social exclusion, marginalization of the woman who has lost her husband, a combination of patriarchy and the caste system that actually aim at obliterating the widow's existence, making her invisible, her property being taken away by her relatives, and she is made a destitute, and then the choices that she has are to go to Vrindavan and stay in one of the ashrams. So there are socio-economic, cultural ramifications. She lives in a very, the widow lives in a very precarious position and pushed to the margins, whether it is through the dress code, and you can see that there is a very uniform kind of a dress code, the very strict stipulation in terms of the diet, social relationships, sexual conduct, very, very strict rules, or the kind of religiosity. So we see that the treatment of widows and the ill treatment of widows, which was an issue in the 1800s, continues to be something that troubles us even of today. Another issue in the 1800s was women's education, and this was a time when schools for girls were established. Home education for women was undertaken because of the parda system, which prevented the mobility of women. Women's access to literacy education improved, although the contents of education, if we look at the contents of education at that time, a lot of it was related to home-related skills, whether it was cooking, cleaning, furniture polishing, embroidery, and so on. But what the education, particularly the literacy and for young girls, what it did was it helped build self-confidence, and that self-confidence also helped counter gender-based violence. And women's education in the early 1800s helped the women to take over the women's movement subsequently, because in the social reform movement phase, we see that a lot of the leadership was by men, even though women did participate. As far as women's education is concerned, there are many names that come to our mind: Jyotiba Phule, Savitriba Phule, Fatima Sheikh, Anandibai Joshi, Pandita Ramabai. These are some of the women who worked in the, who were actively participating in the social reform movement and on education of women and girls. And in Savitribai Phule, for example, actively worked towards empowering women and fighting against customs like shaving the heads of widows. So this was a very, very barbaric, horrific practice where a widow's hair was shaved off in order to make her look very unattractive, so that no man will want to have sexual relations with her. In fact, interestingly, Savitribai Phule organized what is now known as the Barber strike in Pune and Mumbai in order to oppose this particular barbaric practice. One of the other aspects of social reform in the first phase was also religious reform. And this happened in the 1830s onwards. So attacks on caste hierarchies, caste-based structures, priesthood, exploitation of women within religious structures and institutions, And this was not only within the Hindu community, but it was reforms in Hindu, Islam, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Neo-Buddhism, Sikh communities, and all communities. There was this kind of an awakening, and there was this kind of a religious reform as well. And this whole aspect of untouchability and that was countered, and schools were opened for girls. Ceremonies of marriage were simplified. Intercaste marriages were encouraged. Non-Brahmins were being trained in priesthood, because earlier it was priesthood was a livelihood or a kind of work that was reserved only for the Brahmins. Brahmo Samaj, for example, emphasized on human dignity and opposed sati. And Arya Samaj and Brahmo Samaj started inducting women preachers in late 1800s. So, recently I went to Europe, and there was a lot of talk about how within Catholic churches and so on, there needs to be women priests who need to be there, and even within the Protestant communities, how we need to have women religious leaders. And it's interesting that this is something that in India, even in the 1800s, this was already started. We move on to the next phase, which is the nationalist movement, which is from the early 1900s to 1947. Of course, this was a time when women became visible in the public sphere in many ways. And Gandhiji was, as a national leader, was a motivating force who actually helped bring women from within the domestic sphere onto the public sphere. And there were mass movements in 1920s, 1930s. Women participated in large numbers in all of these, whether it was the salt satyagraha, whether it was the civil disobedience movement. In all of these, women have participated in big numbers. But if we, I'm referring here to Anupama Roy and her article, which is on the women's movements. And what she tells us is that there was an ideology of women's proper place. And the women's proper place was the domestic sphere. And that became entrenched. And that was also an essentialist construction of femininity. So, of course, women started participating publicly, but even as they participated publicly, there was a kind of notion of women as self-sacrificing, as peace-loving, and so on, and as being the spiritual essence of India, and so on. So this is something that we see, and this is something again that today we can really critique. And Partha Chatterjee, of course, says that during this particular phase, women's emancipation was in the cultural or spiritual domain, but it wasn't really in the political domain. While nationalist discourse widened the scope for women's public participation, it still maintained a public silence on women's issues, particularly on violence against women within the family, subordination of women within the family, the structure of family itself, the oppressive structures of the family, of the institution of marriage, of family, of the caste structure and its intersection with gender. These are things which still remained to be not worthy of bringing out in the public. So in that sense, there was no real possibility of radical restructuring of power within the family during this particular phase. I've just put some, I've shared some photographs here because when we think of the nationalist movement, most of the names that come to our mind are names of men, but here I have shared some pictures, and where there was a demand for reforms in family laws, family law reform, in equal rights in inheritance and marriage, and so on. Women in the salt satyagraha, civil disobedience movement, where women had a confrontation with the police and the army, boycott day demonstration, civil disobedience movement, Bombay, where women took part in very large numbers. These are some of the women within the nationalist movement: Beena Das, Shanti Ghosh, Durga Bhabi, Matangini Hazra. So, these are names that I'm bringing only to show how the women's movement was a very, very integral part of the nationalist movement at that time. And this is again some of the names and pictures of women within the independence movement. These are the names of the 15 women who shaped the Indian Constitution. And it is important to note that many of the issues that they brought about in the Constituent Assembly were not necessarily only women's issues. They did bring women's concerns, they did discuss women's concerns, but they also discussed many, many of the national concerns or concerns related to, for example, caste and social structures and so on. So this is just to give us a sense of our founding mothers in the Indian Constitution. And then we move on to the post-independence era. Let me just check how much time I have. I think I'm almost done in terms of time. Let me try to rush a little bit. So in the post-independence era, one of the approaches was to question gender-based structures that subordinated women, and the focus was on principles of equality in the public and private spheres. And here the strategy, one of the strategies was the symbol of daughter and the symbol of working woman replaced the symbol of mother. So in the earlier phase, we had Mother India, so, India as a mother, nation as a mother, and this was replaced with symbols of daughter and of working women. Some of the issues that were taken up were inclusion of sex equality, affirmative action in the Indian Constitution, women's franchise, inclusion of women's rights into radical social movements of that time. So in the post-independence era, we also had the Telangana movement, we had Hindu law reform, we had participation in various reforms. But what I'm going to talk a little more on is the anti-alcohol agitation and the anti-price rise agitation, because these are kind of linked directly to the gender-based violence, which is the topic of this training. These are examples of, these are photographs from the anti-price rise agitation. This one is in Mumbai. So women's everyday experiences due to price rise. So with price rise, less food available at home, less savings, less socio-economic welfare within the family, and given the gender discriminatory structure within the family, it was the girl children and the women who suffered the most, whether it was in terms of availability of food leading to malnutrition, or in terms of health issues, and so on. So rolling pins, empty ghee tins, and kitchen ladle, these were symbols of the protesting women. And a plate was used, and there was a plate beating program which was organized in February 1974, simultaneously at more than 1,000 places in Mumbai. So for us to think that, at a time when there were no mobile phones, there were no internet connections, how did the women's movement at that time organize this simultaneous plate beating campaign in 1,000 places in the city? It's something for us to really think about. This is a picture of the anti-price rise agitation in Gujarat. So it wasn't only in Mumbai. There were many cities where the anti-price rise agitation was. This particular picture, it's not a very clear one, but this one is from Bihar. The other issue during this third phase was the anti-alcohol agitation, because it was largely believed that liquor consumption is a contributory factor to gender-based violence, particularly domestic violence. We may or may not agree with this. We may think that domestic violence or gender-based violence happens because of patriarchy. Alcohol is only an excuse. But at that point in time, liquor consumption was looked at, and that was why there was a targeting in terms of anti-alcohol agitation. So you had liquor contractors who were arrested. And this particular picture, whenever I show this picture, it agitates a lot of participants, because we don't really agree with this kind of a public shaming and stripping of men's clothes and making them stand on chairs. And we feel very uncomfortable with this kind of a strategy now. But this is in the 1970s, and liquor contractors were very powerful. And at that particular point in time, this led to a depletion in savings for families, and the men would put away all their salary into liquor, and that led to a lot of difficulties in the home for women and girls. These are pictures of anti-alcohol agitation in Karnataka, as well as in Kerala. This is the picture at the bottom is by tribal women's groups in a place called Attapadi in Kerala. And you can see that, Sharab Nahi Rozgar de do. So there was this demand for livelihood options instead of alcohol. I will very quickly, in a few minutes, just take us through the contemporary era, though I think, because I think this is a phase that has been discussed much more. The focus in the contemporary era was criminalization of specific forms of violence against women, contesting equality within the matrimonial home. So the matrimonial home till then was somewhat looked at as a safe space for women. But it was in this phase that this particular myth was really busted, and the fact that the domestic sphere or the house is not really a safe space either for women or for children, particularly came to be highlighted. Intersectionality was another aspect that came in at this time. So when we say women are not homogeneous. So the caste identity, the religious identity, the class identity, all of these, along with the gender identity, all of this combines together in terms of the marginalization that a woman faces. So the aspect of intersectionality also came to be centered and focused during this contemporary era. Other than this, the whole aspect of right to control over the body. So whether it is the Me Too movement, sexual harassment at the workplace, and whether it was rape or domestic violence, the whole aspect of right to control over the body. These are from the anti-rape campaign. We had many gang rapes by policemen, by men in uniform. So Mathura in 1972 in Maharashtra, Ramiza B in 1978 in Hyderabad, Maya Tyagi in 1980 in UP, and these became triggers for the women's movement to actually demand accountability of men in uniform, safety of women in police stations, and to bring in a better protection, both in terms of institutional reform as well as in terms of law reform on rape. These are pictures related to dowry killings. I'm not going to use the term dowry deaths because it's very euphemistic. These were killings, or these were, abetment to women committing suicide, and it happened across many states. The largest protests were, of course, in Delhi, because Delhi had a very high number of dowry murders, which the police records put down as either suicides or as accidents. And it was women's groups which actually went and studied the police records to find this out. So Tarvinder Kaur, Kanchan Chopra, Shashi Bala, Manjushri Sarda. So these are, and very horrific manner in which women were killed, whether it was by potassium cyanide or being force-fed acid, or by stub bursts. So in some of these cases, the mothers of the women who passed away then took on leadership in terms of the protests against dowry killings. These are examples, and these are posters also from the campaign against domestic violence. One of the important articles on this is by Indra Jaising, the article titled "Bringing Rights Home, Review of the Campaign for a Law on Domestic Violence." So 498A IPC enacted in 1983, and thereafter in 2005, after many national state level consultations to understand the reality of women's experiences in terms of domestic violence, the 2005 Domestic Violence Act was enacted. These are pictures from campaign against religious fundamentalism, and we see that this continues to be an issue even now. This started with all the communal violence and the Ram Janmabhoomi movement that happened then with Shah Banu judgment, and the whole backlash and the protest against that from conservative sections of society. But we see that religious fundamentalism continues to be an issue even today. Agitations against sati, Dalit women's rights. So these are some of the, one of the pictures right at the bottom is of women burning baskets. These are baskets in which they carry, they are forced to carry night soil. And this is a way of Dalit women protesting against this kind of work which undermines their dignity. Campaign for reproductive rights and campaign against sex-selective abortions. Dr. Vibhuti Patel was very much an active participant of this particular campaign, and she would be able to tell you more. But this campaign led to 1994, the Prenatal Diagnostics Techniques Act, and thereafter in 2003, it became PCP and DT in order to improve the regulation of technology used in sex selection, because the technology, as the technology improved or the technology developed, the law had to keep pace with it as well. The struggle against state repression is another aspect, whether it was Armed Forces Special Powers Act, custodial rape and killings, Takjam Manorama in Manipur, Shopian rapes and murders in Kashmir. These are some examples. So the struggle against state repression is another aspect where women's movement has been very active. Irom Sharmila in Manipur, Parveena Ahangar in Kashmir, Angami in Nagaland. These are some of the women leaders who took up this struggle against state repression. There was also this campaign against draconian laws that continues till date, whether it is against death penalty or against Section 377 IPC till we had the Navdeep Johar judgment and so on. Campaign on communal violence bill. These are some of the pictures from the campaign, and particularly these are pictures from the campaign that took place in Mumbai and the press conference that took place in Mumbai. So these are my final slides. Indian women's movement and gender-based violence in a nutshell. Some of the achievements that we have had are law, policy, and institutional reform. Policies in terms of 5-year plans, census, national policies. Also, the National Family Health Survey has played a very, very important role in giving us statistics in terms of, the kinds of violence, the magnitude of violence, the attitude of men and women in relation to gender-based violence. That tells the women's movement, or that informs the women's movement as to what are the directions that we need to take in terms of countering all of this. Law reform is, of course, a very integral part of the outcome. As well as institutional reform. So whether it is police, creation of special cells for women and children, reform in terms of the courts, how courts deal with these issues, having, for example, the witness protection unit is an important aspect which has come in through institutional reform. Women's homes, shelter homes, educational institutions, National Commission for Women, State Commission for Women, and so on, and creating that kind of accountability. So the engagement with law and justice has been in varied ways, protesting against laws and judgments, demanding accountability for gender-based violence, both by state and non-state actors, law reform initiatives, challenging anti-women policies or practices in the courts of law, addressing proper implementation of laws as well. And as Professor Vibhuti had said earlier about women's leadership in decision making, so reservation as an important aspect for that. And influencing international human rights standards. So these are some of the aspects in which the women's movements have engaged with the issue of gender-based violence and attempting to end it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful discussion. I would now like to invite Professor Vibhuti Patel-ji, ma'am, to give the chair's remarks.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Saumya Uma, for such a comprehensive and analytically robust account of 200 years of various efforts collectively and individually made for women's rights and to fight against gender-based violence. Only two missing links which I see. One is that a suicide report, which was forced, the British government was forced to prepare this report in response to massive number of suicides by women and young women, both in in-laws family and in the natal family, where Pushpa Mehta, she very doggedly worked for it, as a result of which we also got in Bombay presidency at least, Vikas grew. So the women survivor of violence, or women who found the life very unbearable, need not commit suicide. They could stay in Vikas group. And in Bombay also we got this Bapnu Ghar. That was all in the 1930s. And another thing was that the rape survivors during partition in all the three borders, East Pakistan, India, West Pakistan, and Kashmir Valley, and the massive role and the heroic contribution of women who were managing these refugee camps, Mrinalini Sarabhai, Kamalaben Patel, and her testimony, the autobiography she has written, The Uprooted, where she vividly describes under what circumstances they were providing institutional support, and also convincing and persuading the Prime Minister to start Central Social Welfare Board. But otherwise, I think it's a brilliant presentation, extremely useful for all this, because it provides the historical, the legacy that we all have inherited. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The floor is now open to questions from the audience. You can raise hand on Zoom or type in the Q&A box. Seema Malhotra ji, would you like to say something, ma'am?
Pallavi Chakraborty has raised her hand.
Yes, ma'am, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, a very good evening, everyone. Ma'am, that was such an excellent presentation. What I wanted to ask you is that you traced the journey and you covered part of the, nationalist movement that called for women's participation. But there was also another side of the discourse where, it was around mid-1900s when the same nationalist movement, under the veneer of wanting to protect women, were also banning women for, say, choosing the profession that they wanted to choose. For instance, we can think of the ban on, dancing girls, the anti-notch movement, which was also a part of nationalist movement, which under the, veneer of the savior complex, drove so many women away from the profession that, brought bread and butter to their table. I just wanted to ask you, how do you address that? And there were also, acts and laws such as SITA, SITA, which were so carefully named in order to bring shame to the profession. So I would just like to hear your remarks on this.
Thank you for that very interesting question, Pallavi. As I mentioned, 1900s was a time when there were these contradictions in regard to societal perception of women's roles. So yes, women would come out onto the streets for demonstration and so on. Yet there was this idea of women as, of the ideal woman, right? As sacrificing, as peace loving, as somebody who was steeped in domesticity, and so on. So I think it was this same kind of, so that the idea of women freely taking up their profession was not something that was articulated at that time, because the focus then was on, on the independence, on gaining independence and fighting against the British. That came to be the focus. And yes, there was a lot of essentializing of women itself, which many scholars, including Partha Chatterjee and Anupama Roy, have talked about. And that's why, this whole understanding, if we compare, the anti-notch movement in the 1900s to the bar dancers, the banning of bar dancers and the campaign against that, much more recently, we see that the manner in which the women's movement, the words we use, the articulation of our own rights that we demand and we assert is also very, very different. And this difference comes with this, almost a century of, experiences, of insights, of collective resistance, as well as collective knowledge. That is what has brought us to a stage where we can now say that women have a right to livelihood, and nobody through government policy or so on can rob us of that. But this was not the language in which the women's movement spoke in the early 1900s. And I see that as a collective and progressive knowledge sharing and information gathering and strategy formulation that has happened over a period of time.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Thank you very much, ma'am. But like my intention of asking this question was that in the light of the recent events that have emerged across the globe, and if we're particularly talking about India, there are too many to count, right? There's been a re-emergence of the tendency to promote a certain kind of femininity in India. So, and there's also the question of the that policy, the system of law, the system of police and policemen, can they ever be divorced from policing? And can a penal code ever protect something which is, say, maternal? So my question is that, and are we moving backwards?
I'm not sure I understand your question fully. I think it had different parts to it. Is there a re-emergence of tendency to promote femininity? Yes, there is. And, now it comes packaged in neoliberal language, right? It comes packaged in, it is my choice. I am exercising it. We still do Karwa Chauth now, but now, we justify Karwa Chauth saying it is my choice. I'm doing it because I want to. So yes, there is a promotion. We are, so long as we understand that there are these tendencies to become regressive, I think the women's movement can be conscious enough and alert enough to address that. This is not really related to gender-based violence, but the very recent example of, these vegetarian, where all vegetarian green bikes, right? So there was a backlash, and the backlash was against a kind of imposition of vegetarianism. So I think there are tendencies to become regressive, but I think the women's movement is also very alert and conscious of it, and it is able to address that and arrest it where it happens. In terms of your question about the usefulness of criminal law, I would say that, as somebody, as a law professional, as a law professor, and as a litigating lawyer earlier, criminal law is only one aspect of it, but criminal law does play an important role, particularly when it comes to violence and brutal forms of violence. That is considered not as violence against an individual, but violence against a society. And I think that philosophy is very important, and that approach is very important. Because of having criminal law, has the crime rate reduced? No. Has the gender-based violence reduced because of criminal law? Maybe not. But it could also be because women are encouraged to report crimes much more. It may be that the incidence has increased, the magnitude has increased, but it could also be that women are encouraged to report these crimes. And if even one woman wants to report a crime, there needs to be a criminal law provision for her to make use of. We cannot say that criminal law is not doing its job, so let us not have these criminal law provisions. Yes, Domestic Violence Act with all those civil remedies are very, very important. But if a woman wants to pursue criminal law remedies, it needs to be made available to her. And criminal law provisions also send this message of that a particular kind of violence or a particular kind of atrocity is completely there needs to be a zero tolerance to it. That is a message that criminal law communicates, and I think that's an important message as far as gender-based violence is concerned.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If there are no more questions, I think we can move on to the next session. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your invaluable insights during the session and for providing such a comprehensive history of women's movements in India. We hope to see you at future IMPRI events as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Professor Vibhuti Patel, and great to see Dr. Shalu Nigam as well. And thank you, Rehmat. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. With this, we now move on to our next session on NGOs as a catalyst for change, advocacy and implementation of gender policies by Dr. Keerthi Bollineni ji, President Vasavya Mahila Mandala, Vijayawada. Over to you, ma'am.
Good evening to all.
Good evening.
And it is quite interesting taking forward the discussion with which Professor Saumya has already given, and let us take it forward how the NGOs can be a catalyst for advocacy. Till now we have heard about the journey of the history of the women's movement, and also during the freedom movement, how the women are able to come up, and also how the legal framework also is able to initiated, and the women have able to take it. So now let me focus on NGOs as catalysts for change, advocacy and implementation of gender policies in India. So mine is a 40 minutes, so I'll try to complete. And the purpose of this session is basically make you understand how the NGOs as catalysts can take forward to bring about changes in the gender policies to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, which is Sustainable Development Goal 5, looking towards the gender equality. And the timeline to reach is by 2030. It is hardly another 6 to 7 years. So let us see that how you all can also play with us, which we are also playing. Next. Just before going into the content, I thought of just brushing your knowledge relating to what is an NGO. NGO is a non-governmental organization. We see the state actors or non-state actors. So when we talk of the non-state actors, we get non-governmental organizations, mostly registered, and women's groups, professional groups, trade unions, whose aim is to improve the members and work for the well-being of communities. It is mostly non-profit also. It's a secular organizations, and some you see a religious also. And catalyst is to be individuals who bring people together and prompt them to engage with one another. How do we? One engage with the other. And advocacy is basically any action that speaks in favor of, recommends, argues for a cause, supports or defends or pleads on behalf of others. If there is an issue, how we can take it forward by combining all. And gender, as you all know, refers to the socially constructed roles, behaviors and expressions and identities of women, girl, boy, man, and gender diverse people. So this is what in a nutshell, which we are going to deal now. So I thought that better brush you before going into the things. So what is the role of an NGO as a catalyst? Basically, through research and advocacy and mobilization, NGOs raise awareness about pressuring issues. The pressuring issue when Nirbhaya was raped that's a pressuring issue. And shift the public opinion and compel the governments to take action. So here there are different steps, may not be required the research, that time, if you see Nirbhaya one, and awareness for pressuring issues and shifted the public opinion and made it to bring the amend the law, which we normally call Nirbhaya Act. And the NGOs are catalysts for social movements, empowering individuals to join forces and fight for change. Now we have here from the previous ma'am that the social movements, even the freedom movements or the feminist movements or the women's movements, how it has been taken forward to bring a change for the empowerment of women. Even we can say that in the many countries where the women didn't even have vote, but here in India, we got it through our constitution. That shows that our country is looking at gender equality in different arenas: social, educational, economic, and political. Next. But here I want to tell that whatever the laws are there, but we should also see the dynamism and the transitory period that we should take into consideration when we want to talk of advocacy. It's a process by using information strategically. We do have numbers many times, whether it's government corridors or NGO corridors. But are we converting the data into the information? Or the numbers, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, is it just standing like that? Are we representing only those numbers? If we do not convert the data into the information, it's just for the report. It's a stagnant. So we have to make the data into the information and use this to change the policies. Why do we have to change the policies? Basically, we have at the bottom of the pyramid who are unable to reach many of the services, whether it's the schemes. So that is affecting their lives. Still, after 75 years of independence, we call below poverty line and poverty-stricken areas, poverty in the people. So how do we change these things? So what we should do for that is, one is using of information, second is lobbying for changing the development and political institution which is involved, and also building the advocacy skills in the NGOs. The policies might be a local policy at the panchayat level, or at the district level, or at the state level, or at the national or international level. But what is required among the NGOs, its management and also its staff is advocacy skills building is very, very essential. Because normally we think that NGOs are only to do the community mobilization and do the activities and deliverables only. But this is also an essential area where to reach the SDGs, we need to work on advocacy to change the policies and for effective implementation of the policies. Next. What is the role of NGO in good governance? Nowadays, we are all hearing in the NGO sector about good governance. The good governance, whenever you hear, two things are very important. There's accountability and transparency. That is very, very important. We ask the government, we are the taxpayers. So why don't you give it? Because today morning I got a message from one of the women who is fighting in the courts. She asked for a GO, government order, number so-and-so, which is passed by the government in 1994. But as the state of Andhra Pradesh is bifurcated into Andhra and Telangana, they are telling currently it's not available at the desk level for the middle level officers. So they told again, you have to approach the principal secretary. Can't we keep all the government orders on the website? Yes, it's a mandatory. But how many governments are keeping it? So same way, how do the NGOs can be accountable and transparent, which is very, very essential by keeping our websites open and keeping your annual reports and also updating our information and projects. And also to maintain annual reports that are available to the public. Because we get the funds from different sources. And people will also know what kind of an advocacy you are doing. What is the things? Next. What is the role of catalyst? Catalysis has manifested the role as fundamental tool in pollution prevention. First started with pollution issue, and it has been increasing its efficiency, yield, and selectivity. So, one is the catalysis is used for that and now recognized accomplishing a wide range of sustainable development goals. How do we reach it? Why is advocacy important in an organization? As an NGO, people tell that, is it your role to work on the advocacy or to work on it? Advocacy of utmost importance to protect the rights of the people who may otherwise be dismissed or ignored. The NGO should be the voice of the voiceless. How many people are able to raise the voice? So we should raise the voice of the voiceless. And why do we raise? To protect the rights of those people. And advocates are often the only independent support that people receive in some of the most challenging moments in their life. And we must continue to promote advocacy services all over the country to build gender equality. About 4 years ago, when I met one of the women activists, she told that the momentum which we have, the moments which we ran previously is not that level currently. But what we have to understand is nowadays to build these movements is very easy for advocacy services. We can use the social media and build the advocacy and how we can give it to bring about gender equality. Next. So what are the important characteristics of catalyst? A catalyst does not initiate a chemical reaction. It's not a chemical reaction, you should keep in mind. And a catalyst is not consumed in the reaction also. And what is it? The catalysts tend to react with reactants to form intermediates and at the same time facilitate the production of the final reaction product. What do we do is, what kind of intervention is required, and the catalyst will look at the final reaction of the product. What is the deliverable? We are able to see it. The outcome and output of the product is very, very important for the catalyst to do it. And the types of advocacy by NGOs. I just made like a few areas. This all keeping in view my experience, I did it. Online advocacy platforms to bring changes in policies. And the second one is pressure group strategy. Third one is evidence-based research for advocacy. And the fourth one is PILS. We hear people's interest litigation. So let us see few of the NGOs and individuals, how they are able to bring the policies change. Online advocacy platform, and I don't know how many of you are aware of it. Change.org, a platform is there. So one of the women who is a single mother and she has a daughter and she wants to bring a passport for her daughter. That's in 2017, 2018. So she went to the passport officer and she applied and it was not accepted because it's only the mother's name was there. Then what the mother did is, she is an educated working woman. She kept a campaign petition on change.org and in 2018 and received about 30,000 signatures. That led to the change in the policy. Acceptance of mother's name in the passport of minors, which is previously only father name. Is it not going towards gender equality? Yes, because mother is equally important, or her name also can be taken up, even the child currently not having a fit father means responsible father if the child is not having. Only the responsible mother is there, then the mother's name can go into the passport. This is one of the winning campaigns in the change.org. And second one is, I just want to show you that evidence-based research for advocacy by NGOs, how we can do it. Vasavya Mahila Mandali, for which now I am spearheading as president, where we are running a family counseling center. There we have seen that many women are coming, as we heard, due to domestic violence. And the major problem they are facing is the husband is not responsible, even to pay house rents, even to pay school fees for the children, even to pay the basic necessities the families to take forward, like food and all those things. Then we have section 125 of Criminal Procedure Code in India, and that is for maintenance of women in marital discord, including the elderly maintenance also. So when we have seen the agonies of the women in our counseling center, so what we did is, we have Googled it now, as everybody is doing it, and there's no data to prove the issue on the online. And we talked to a few of the researchers. Then what we did is, we, with different skilled people set, we formed into a group, and we thought that an evidence-based research is very, very essential. And we developed a concept note and developed timelines and actions with microplan with expected deliverables. Why I'm telling this one is, advocacy also we should take it as a project. When a project mode it goes, it is very methodical and very strategic to reach the deliverables. And we developed a problem statement. After that, how do we develop a problem statement to post on the change.org, an online advocacy platform is, we developed a methodology of research and focus group discussions, questionnaire and interviews. And first the tool was piloted and finalized the based inputs from the piloting. That is, we did in the Vijayawada family court. The family court didn't give us any kind of information. So then the woman who is collecting the data, she stood at the family court and talked to the women, those who are coming for the justice, and they have given the inputs to do this small research with 134 women. And then the type of data collection that led to the basic one that led to post on a change.org in 2018. And the type of data collection is evidence from government sources. And the COVID time, actually we thought of conducting national level media campaigns and all those things, but COVID has restricted the mobility. Then we thought that let us use the Right to Information Act. So we wrote to all the 600 plus courts in India, district courts, and we received the information about these maintenance cases, how many are pending in the court. For 3 years, we got the information under different acts, section 125 CRPC and Domestic Violence Act, like that. And also we got from the domestic violence cells under the government departments and also women commissions. So collected the data from different government departments, and also we talked to some of the experts, those who are retired judges and the people, those who worked in the government in the planning section or retired IAS officers who led the Women and Child Welfare Department like that, and the law departments. Next. Then what we did is, with all this big data, we appointed a consultant to make it a robust policy document. And we shared this policy document with policymakers, media, and academia. why is important, and collaborated with academic institutions to conduct consultations, documentation, and further policy level documentation. We improved the document. Now the second edition is also available on our website. So we did that previously. Then what we did is we conducted consultations in Delhi, Bangalore, Bhubaneswar, Mumbai. So why we did is to get involve the different people like MPs and MPs from Law and Justice Committee and advocates and bureaucrats, including the IAS and IPS officers, and also those who are from the state level women commissions also, and some academia from the lab background. Next. Then what we did is, next, in-person meetings with members of parliament, ministers, officers, National Human Rights Commission, National Women's Commission. Some are very encouraging, some told that that change will not come. Domestic violence is a normalized issue. There comes the problem. The attitudes of the people think that the domestic violence is a normal issue. It's not normal. Never, never take domestic violence as a normal issue. Then one of the sensitized member of parliament introduced a private member bill in the parliament, and it was introduced in 2022 in the parliament, and also provided inputs to concerned department to frame changes. Then the Home Ministry has invited us to, and the Women and Child Welfare Department invited us to provide the inputs for this section 125 of Criminal Procedure Code. And then consistently we are working with government officers, law commissioner, and also there is a parliamentary committee on law and justice. Now in India, for the parliament, we have different committees. So to change this policy, we are in contact with law and justice, and also we invited them for our consultation and they spoke. And then now comes the interesting thing is the government of India has also taken a keen interest in the changing laws which are about 100 years ago. Then they changed the CRPCR, Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. So the name was changed, but it was passed. But to bring a comprehensive changes in the sections, it takes another 2 years. Why I'm telling is, this year is a 2024 is a current electioneering year, and then formation of the cabinet, then taking up the new issues will not happen this year. So when I recently met one of the Supreme Court advocate, they told that up till 2025 December, these laws which are IPC, CRPC and Evidence Act, which are kept in the parliament, will not take for a detailed revision. So that's why we are approaching the Supreme Court, where there is time duration to frame laws is going to be a long one, and also at least we can help some of the families by bringing the changes through the Supreme Court. That's what the current situation. So this case is previous case which I told about, the section 125 of CRPC is a clear cut how the NGOs can take the online platform and also use the research and also use the pressure strategy through the consultations involving different stakeholders. So this is all a whole gamut and a process, and never get discouraged. The time will come. We have to go in a very strategic manner, and what we thought during the COVID is changed us our direction to take a different route. But that's also one of the opportunity we took it and use the RTI as one of the tools. And the next act, which we all know, is prevention of sexual harassment women at workplace. In 1997, Banwari Devi, a frontline government functionary, was gang raped in Rajasthan for stopping a child marriage. Rajasthan is one of the states where there was a lot of child marriages. Still, it is happening. But the police station has rejected her complaint because she was gang raped. But even then, the police has rejected it because the marriage was of a big person in that family, influential person. Then she approached the NGO, Vishaka, and they filed a appeal in the Supreme Court in 1997. I told that one of the area, the strategy to bring a change is through pill. The Supreme Court has given an order in 1937. The guidelines were issued by Government of India based on Supreme Court landmark judgment. So we see that it took from 1997 to 2013 to turn into a law, pass a law in the parliament. So just imagine, it took more than 15 years to pass a law to create a kind of a workplace safety for the woman, for the working woman. So when we talk of gender equality, when we are taking ahead, even the government's political will is very, very essential when we are doing from the NGO. Here in this case study, you'll be seeing that Vishaka has played an NGO has played a vital role in bringing drastic steps where there is no law for the working woman. So it took 15 years, then it is passed. But in many of our working places, we are seeing still that internal complaints committees not at all there, or if formed also, many departments are not aware how to form it. Here I want to tell that with a 4-member, the committee to be there, with among them, one should be an external member. That's a must. If you are working, because as you are studying this short course, if you are working, question your management that do we have the ICC in a proper way, and go to the Google and find out what is a prevention of sexual harassment at women at workplace, so that you will know more about the law. And recent one, I want to tell that the support persons in POCSO cases. POCSO is protection of children in sexual offenses. A law came into existence, is a gender neutral law. Means it can be child is 18 years up till, so it can be a boy or a girl of any gender can be taken into consideration. For child sexual abuse, the child is mentally traumatized by having this sexual abuse. But the current law, it didn't given any kind of an opportunity for the mental health well-being of the child and the family members. And also through the District Legal Service Authority, a compensation will be paid for the rape. That is there in the law. But who has to follow it up? That follow-up mechanism link is not there. In 2021, we the women of India filed a writ petition in Supreme Court of India. Why they filed in the Supreme Court of India the writ petition is, when the NGO is doing mental well-being counseling for the sexual offenses, children and the victims and their caregivers, and follow-up of them for the education or rehabilitation, and also giving them a legal compensation which is to be done. But the government has, and the departments have objected them that you should not do all these things. Then they filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court, and in October 2023, and this is almost took 2+ years, the Supreme Court of India has passed orders by giving direction to appoint support persons and support NGOs through district child protection units or child welfare committees. So This is a very recent judgment where the guidelines were framed up by the National Child Protection and Child Rights Commission and shared the draft guidelines to all the NGOs in India to get the feedback. In November 2023, I'm also part of this consultation where we have given a feedback to the government that what is the draft guidelines to be improvised. So they improvised and the final guidelines are shared to the states to implement it. And as NGOs, I suggest that if you are from NGO or if any NGO whom you know working in the area of child sexual abuse, ask them to register it through their Women and Child Welfare Department or Child Welfare Committees to become a support person or support NGOs and provide a kind of a counseling for them. So here you are seeing that one of the incident which has led, like Posh Act, here also the incident which has stopped them led to file a red petition that brought about a change where India, where we are seeing so many child sexual abuses cases are on rise in India. So this is the area where again the NGOs are working towards an advocacy efforts. Very, very essential. Never think that the NGOs are only to do implementation level, but this kind of advocacy efforts are helping to bring the changes, to follow up and to improve the life of the child and also to improve the life of the vulnerable families. This is what you can see the progress in different cases where you have seen the passport, how they have changed it through an online advocacy. So if you see any kind of a thing, normally what we see in India is when we see anything, we just don't want to go into any kind of a controversy or don't want to raise our voice. No. If we don't raise our voice, Junior Martin Luther King, what he told is, we are also part of the crime. No, don't be like that. So be a part of it and professionally learn these things, how to file these things or get in touch with some of the advocate friends and they will help how to take it forward. So the last but not the least is we reach to sustainable development goals by NGOs through advocacy for gender equality. As I already told that gender equality is SDG 5 and that we have to reach. NGOs not only working towards the projects for implementation, but we need to work towards the projects for advocacy. I know pretty well, next one. I know pretty well that many of these NGOs, when we apply for advocacy, we are not getting funding. Yes, very important. And for corporate funding under CSR also, they are not giving it. They give for livelihoods, skilling, or when their names are being displayed only. But we should negotiate that with the government and also make it the people to know at the different level and the officers at the different level that advocacy should be taken into the CSR, not only implementation. So the deliverables, when you talk of advocacy, if you take up a livelihood project, if you want to reach 100, you will reach within the time bound. But with the advocacy, it's a long term and the outcome of the project may or may not be. That we should keep in mind. So such type of things also we should take it up and it's possible. Yes, we all can bring a change and we can work towards the gender equality because we have seen many examples how we are all doing it. Let us be very positive working towards the advocacy. Thank you so much to meet you all virtually.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your expertise and perspective have added tremendous value to our collective understanding. I would now like to invite our chair, Professor Vibhuti Patel ji, to give the chair's remarks.
So, Dr. Keerthi, you have really shown how the NGOs are conscience keeper in the when it comes to mammoth task of combating gender-based violence. And thank you for profiling the processes, because that is very important for building campaigns and changing the mindset of decision makers in politics, governance, legal system by using research, data, judicial route, as well as legislative route. And you give ample examples of and successful examples of that. Only one thing which I would like to add is that NGOs have also unleashed creative energy by very, very effective and powerful use of street theater, like plays like Om Swaha or the Basti Basti Angan Agar, the whole anthology which Jagori has prepared, or the songs in Hindi and all Indian regional languages combating gender-based violence, the poems and verses and paintings and posters and slogans. I think that is also very important, because when we recite that in the schools or in WDC Women Development Cell or during rallies and picketing and all, it always stays, no? So I think that is also a very important contribution of NGOs. But you have really captured, it's such a big challenge that you had, both you and Saumya had, no, of covering such a huge canvas, which you did it so beautifully, and the engaging, like not a single second was there when one felt away from the lecture. No, we were completely 100% associated with what you were speaking, and it was also like we were also getting the mental picture of what you were describing. Thank you very much. Very powerful narrator and storyteller, both you and Professor Saumya are.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. The floor is now open for questions from the audience. You can raise your hand on Zoom or type in the Q&A box. Pallavi ji, please go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am. So thank you so much for your session. It was really incredible. I just wanted to ask you this question that, NGOization comes with its own set of dangers, right? I mean, there have been inclusive and, radical positive NGOs such as, say, Swayam, which was a very good initiative. We have Sappho, and so on and so forth. But one of the dangers of NGOization has also been the fact that they tend to put everyone under the same rubric, lacking an intersectional approach. We saw the same thing, and this is also partly related to the question that I asked in the previous session, that, one of the ways in which the anti-notch movement could amass so much of force was through NGOization, because so many women were, coming out with banners, creating a dichotomy between, say, Savitri, or like the pure and the impure. So my question is, I mean, we see this recently also, that there has been a tendency throughout India to push for a certain kind of NGOization, where, I mean, if the woman were trying to save, so-called save, belongs to a discourse that is not following the norm, then they are, still forced to give up their, say, profession as a sex worker to, be a part of the, umbrella. So my question is, what are the ways in which you think NGOs can work to be more intersectional? And how can it not sometimes, which it does, pushes forward the mainstream discourse? Sometimes NGOs do tend to, stand for whatever the, mainstream discourse is saying. So my question is, what are the ways in which NGOs can think about these issues in order to become more, say, inclusive and equitable?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pallavi. And basically, in your question is inclusivity. Yes, very, very essential. Normally, when NGOs, when they work, especially when we talk of gender-based violence and all these things, they think that we have to work for the woman. Yes, in our counseling center, we get cases where the men have also faced violence from the wives or the family members. So it is vice versa. We are seeing all such cases. So we should be impartial when we are doing it. We should not be judgmental that we are going to work only for the woman. That inclusivity is very essential. And especially in a patriarchal society, we should also work with the men. Very, very essential. in our organization, how do we do is, this year for Women's Day, we have honored some of the men, those who are working and became a support system for the women to take them or accompany them to the police stations to file the complaints, or when they are having some beating or in the blood, they take them to the hospitals. So it is not the women to do women only, but it should be all the people. We should take like that. And now we have to work towards the inclusivity. Then only we can see that the change will come. In some of the areas, today morning, we have one case where the marriage was held just 4 months ago, December end only. Then the woman who came as a daughter-in-law into the family, she is feeling so uncomfortable like that. Then we told, bring her to the counseling center. We don't know whether she has any kind of a premarital relations, which is now very common. So these things, then when I asked that, she told, yes, she loved somebody and the parents didn't accept it because it's intercaste. So all these things, when we think of these things, no, it is, we have to work on different fronts and also involving the different stakeholders, including the men and women and other gender groups is also very, very essential. That exclusion will lead to much more dangers, because we talk of women's education would go in par with men, their workplace which should go in par with men, but in the lifestyle and all those things. Even from the men's side also, there are some things they have to improve from their side, because I am not going due to the time availability for us. So that's why we should always balance between the gender inclusivity and exclusivity when we work, and then only the results will be much more balanced, and it should be effective to implement it.
Thank you so much, ma'am. If there are no more questions, ma'am, then we can move on to the next session.
Yes.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today and patiently interacting with the audience. We look forward to seeing you in future IMPRI events as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
So following 2 remarkable sessions, we are now heading to our final session of the day, a legal hands-on session led by Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam, visiting senior fellow at IMPRI and distinguished advocate, author and researcher in gender and human rights. The floor is yours, ma'am.
Yeah, good evening. Such a wonderful presentations. Since yesterday we have been hearing a lot about so many things, and so today I'll just talk about cyber crimes, because yesterday and even today we have spoken about how cyber crimes are how we can engage with the new technology and the work we have to do. We have seen the work for past 200 years, but then now what we have to do, that we have to also see. So if we talk about the cyber arena, we have to talk about the digital divide, because internet access and its use is not equally distributed. It is estimated that 2.6 billion people around the world, they are currently unconnected, and majority of these are women and girls. So the digital gender gap, it continues to expand in developing countries, and globally in 2022, the data suggests that 62% men use internet and only 57% use internet. And if we talk about least developed countries, only 19% of women could use internet as compared to 86% of women in the developed countries. So basically, there is a huge gap among the internet user, and also among the users of the mobile phone. The ownership of mobile phone is also there is a lot of gender gap. So then the technology world has opened us new doors to connect, learn, and establish, and consolidate business, and all to do all kind of activities. but we can see that the use of internet is highest among the young generation. But again, the space is not gender neutral. We have problems, gender relation problems are there. So social media is commodifying the personal information of the users. We have seen that, how the companies are, misusing the data. So there are dangers within cyberspace, and we have seen during the lockdown that how online abuse against women has increased, and which is inflicting damage, to across, all sections and backgrounds all over. So in January 2021, there was a report which says that the data leakage happened, and the ministry says that it will look into the matter. But again, the data has been leaked. Your personal information, the Aadhaar card data, there was in the news that it was leaked. So basically, in terms, if we talk about violence against women, with the advent of social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, social interactions have been revolution has been happened, but there are also increase in number of hateful comments, and cyber violence is increasing. The sexism is permeating, the misogyny is permeating the online space. And we have seen how the platforms such as Google and Facebook, they have through their methods of logarithms and other things, they have increased racism and misogynist spread of data. So the stereotypes have been perpetuated. So it has resulted in exclusion and violence, and it is affecting our basic human right to safety and freedom of expression. So cyber violence against women, if we say it has, basically it involves interpersonal crimes also, and it involves other kind of crimes such as cyber aggression, online victimization, bullying, defamation, cyber pornography, and all kind of violence is coming, and even cyber bullying and cyber stalking, blackmailing, threatening and economic abuse, and all kind of abuses that we are seeing in past few years. So one of the study which has been conducted on online violence against women, it says that 85% of women users have faced some kind of online violence, and basically this is 45% among Generation Z and 31% among Generation X, and very few women report domestic violence. So, and it's not only in India, but across the globe, this situation is happening and crimes are being conducted. And if we talk about India, the number of crimes being reported by the National Crime Record Bureau, it has been consistently increasing. And despite of underreporting, the number of crimes are increasing, and all these kinds of cyber crimes are being reported, including online scams, identity theft, social injuring, exploiting, and flooding emails and phishing. So one of the studies shows that only 1 in 4 women reported the online, the behavior to the online platform on which it occurred, and only 14% reported it to an offline agency. And 78% of respondents says that women are often unaware of the options that exist to report the harmful behavior. Now, the impact of cyber violence. Now, basically, some of the studies, they say that it has a negative short-term and long-term harmful impact on psychological state, physical condition, and even social engagement of the users. And it leads to shame and ostracization. And so the survivors of cyber violence may withdraw from online space due to fear. And in extreme cases, it may lead to depression, anxiety, trauma, and self-harm. So it can also impact on individuals' economic life. And so there are a range of psychological, social, and economic impact, and we need to do more research on how women in India are being affected by it. Coming to the laws which are regulating cybercrime against women in India. So we have spoken about this law, Section 354. A of Indian Penal Code, which talks about showing pornography, making sexually colored remarks, and demanding a sexual favor from a woman. This law can be applied even on the, if the crime is happening online. Section 354, which talks about, taking image of a woman engaging in, when she is engaged in private act without her consent. So, in fact, today morning I was reading this, news item which says that somebody raped a young girl, 16-year-old girl, and they clicked the video, and then they threatened her that if you tell it to somebody, we will put this video on the social platform. So these kind of offenses. Then section 354D talks about stalking. Again, so this section covers a person who is monitoring women's activity on internet, email, or other forms of electronic communication. So on first conviction, individual may face punishment with 3 years imprisonment or a fine, and on subsequent conviction, it may result in imprisonment up to 5 years. The Information Technology Act 2000. Now, several sections of this act are specifically related to violence, in the context we're talking about. So section 66C, it makes identity theft a punishable offense. So under this section, if a person is using another person's password or electronic signature, that activity will be punished, by imprisonment up to 3 years. Section 66E, it talks about violation of person's privacy. So publishing or transmitting private pictures without the person's consent is punishable up to 3 years of imprisonment and a fine of rupees 2 lakhs. Section 67A, it talks about publication, transmission, and causing of transmission of obscene content, and the person may face imprisonment up to 3 years, and it increase on subsequent convictions. Section 72 talks about breach of confidentiality and privacy. So if a person is found guilty of offense, that person can face imprisonment up to 2 years and fine up to 1 lakh rupees. There's also an Indecent Representation Act of Women Prohibition Act 1986. It talks about regulating and prohibiting indecent representation of women through advertisement, publication, and other means. And section 2 of this law, it defines indecent representation as depiction. It talks about depiction in terms of public morality. So it aims at audiovisual to include audiovisual media and electronic content. But again, the emphasis is on public morality and not on women's safety. So it may not provide justice to victims, but it may empower state to take action against indecent representation. The act says that a penal action can be taken in this case, and but it fails to address online abuse that women face. But there are important cases, which have come up, which are positive. So in Shreya Singhal versus Union of India in 2015, the court struck down section 66A of the IT Act, and it says that it is against the provision under Article 19(2) of the Constitution that is about freedom of expression. And so basically, the act is saying, if there is a kind of conflict between freedom of expression and your online activities, so Article 9, the Constitution will prevail. In another case, in this case, accused was an orthopedic surgeon, and he forced women to perform sexual act. And later he said that, okay, he tried to upload and sell these videos. And so he was charged under section 506, that is, again, relating to, offenses against women, and, in the Indian Penal Code, and section 67 of the IT Act. And he was, given life imprisonment and the fine of 1,25,000 rupees under the Immoral Trafficking Prevention Act. In another case, the accused posted obscene defamatory messages about a divorced woman in the Yahoo Messages group, and advertised her that she is soliciting for sex, and then this person is also being imprisoned for 10 years and with a fine of 2 lakhs of rupees. So, these things are happening, but also there is a gap in the legislation. So, because we don't have any specific law which talks about, cyber violence, which is happening against women. So, we need to work in that direction, that we have a specific law which could deal with violence against women in the cyberspaces. And we have to, if we see the current law, the current prevailing laws, the violation of privacy is being given a very narrow meaning. So under IT Act, it only talks about transmission, publication, or capture of any image, but women's privacy can be violated in multiple ways. And, so we need to discuss and debate and do more research on, these kind of the crimes which are happening. Then there is also difficulty in proving lack of consent. We have spoken about consent in rape cases, how it is difficult to prove. But when it comes to digital crimes, how will you prove that there is a consent or there is a lack of consent? So these kind of issues need to be debated, so that there is a significant gaps in the law regarding cybercrime against women, and also there is lack of awareness about such laws. And again, we have also seen surveillance by the state and the non-state actors and similar such crimes for which there is no law we have made till yet. The government has made national cyber security policy in 2013 for preventing cyber crimes. And also the cybercrime prevention against women and children scheme is being introduced recently. And it allows the cybercrime victim to file a complaint through an online reporting platform. So this is the website. You can go, you can report your offense. There is also an online financial fraud, the helpline number is there. So you can report any crime onto this portal. So you have to register a written complaint, and in many cities there is a dedicated cybercrime cell, and you need to provide all the details about your name, your contact details, and also what has happened, and you can register also register a cybercrime FIR. So you can approach to the police, or you can go to the local police station or to the judicial magistrate. You can also report crime on the social media portals, for example, Facebook, Twitter, and all other kinds of platforms. They have their own complaint cells, and there you can go and report the crime, and the company can take action against online abuse. But one of the interesting, this case which I read, this happened in 2009, the Pink Chuddy campaign. And this is, how creatively the idea of internet has been used, by a group of women. In January 2009, a group of men attacked the woman in Bangalore, India. And this attack was carried out by the members of Sri Ram Sena. And they say that women who are going to pubs, or who are going out on Valentine's Day, they are violating the Hindu culture. And even wearing Western clothes, they say that those women are sluts and they are destroying Indian values and cultures. So basically, now this kind of loose group was formed on the Facebook, and they discussed question of gender violence and safety, and then they come with the idea of Love Sena to counter this idea of this ideology of the women being controlled. And they say that they invite people and to send to collect pink underwears and send it to the headquarters of Sri Ram Sena. So this is a non-violent sign of protest, and very nicely they have protested against these kind of ideology. So what can be done to prevent cybercrime against women? Again, knowledge about cyber literacy and all these kind of things, the knowledge about law, and we have to talk about, good habits, good practices, best practices, or, or working online digital devices. But obviously, online crimes against women are related to, the kind of the culture we are living in. It is about deeply rooted inequalities and misogyny. So we have to change that mindset again and again. This thing is coming up, but then, this thing is important. So the role of state become important. They should have provided platforms where women could report the crime without fear of re-victimization. So a multi-pronged approach is required, and social media platforms should also formulate gender-sensitive policies, and how to navigate the virtual spaces. So these are the kind of lacunas, and we need to find out what could be done. So even if to start from the knowledge from the school level and to the adult level, all kind of literacy we have to programs we have to take up. And this is what the one of the UN site which says that how to enhance cooperation between governments. Because if I'm sitting here and somebody's is online harassing me from a country like US or any other country, so in that case we need the state need to have a kind of coordination with the government over there. So these kind of cooperation between governments, addressing the data gaps, developing and implementing laws and regulations, having a standard of accountability, for different people, like different companies who are involved into that, integrating digital citizenship and ethical use of digital tools has to be fostered through school curriculum, sensitizing young people, strengthening collective action, empowering women and girls to participate and lead in technology sector, ensuring the public and private sector entities prioritize the prevention and elimination of digital violence. And of course, we have seen during the COVID, the way the technology is being used in the case of Bollineni and Solidi's kind of, the incidents which took place. Then the government, the state used facial recognition technologies, as happened during the Northeast Delhi riots and Kisan rallies, and these kind of things which are everywhere. State is using all these kind of we have seen the Pegasus software being it's being introduced in some of the mobiles of various users. So spyware and malwares have been used. So these kind of things we need to rethink, that how the state can be made accountable to protect the citizens' right to privacy. So again, we have to do a lot of research. So I'll just end here, and maybe we can have more discussion around this issue.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such an insightful session. Thank you for sharing your expertise with the participants. I would now like to call upon Professor Vibhuti Patel ji to give the chair's remarks.
Yeah. So thank you, Dr. Shalu Nigam, for bringing out such an important and latest new issue that women are facing, not only in India, but all over the world due to this digital crimes. But I think most important thing which comes out even from your case studies which you have provided is the double standard of sexual morality and the moral policing they are used. The case of, say, Professor college teacher who uploaded her picture in swimsuit. She lost her job, and it was such a prestigious university which threw her out. I think similarly that became a major issue and media covered it. But day-to-day life also, the women are complaining about moral policing on the cyber platform by the employers, by the authorities in education institution, by the hostel wardens, and targeting women who are more vociferous. We saw that in Banaras Hindu University case also, how individual policing and following cyber stalking happens, no? And there have been recent examples where young teenage girls in Mumbai, who had their own opinion, and they gave they liked some uploaded item for which they had to face tremendous violence in person. No, And because it's so easy to even locate with the Google, what is it called, geographic, this thing, GIC, they are able to even locate the victims. So the dangers are really wide, and targeting of young teenage girls who have recently, like who are new to use of this technology. And they are so innocent that you find increasing number of cases. So at least we in SNDT, we had to come out with a leaflet to just alert the girls that, okay, you have friends and you meet people, you attend social gathering. Yes, it is important, but these are the safeguards that you need to have, no? And even the online dating that children do, they totally unknown person, no, with whom they communicate, and then when they are there are demands to meet them in person, and if most of them don't even tell their parents, so dangers are really even more. So democratization of family is also very important. Otherwise, children will end up in soup, yeah, with this technology.
I think that the same morality thing which is happening in the physical world, that is being transferred to the digital world. So we have to really, address now in both the worlds. We
Yeah,
have to talk
correct.
about addressing the issues of, autonomy and, safety, and everything has to be, to
At
take.
one level, we oppose that parents or elders just should not check the mobile and their entries and all. But at the other level, when you see there's so many dangerous situations in which children get trapped. So that is the dilemma, because so many of young mothers, they also say that we all fought for our rights and autonomy and freedom and all from our parents. But the kind of horror stories that we get about the boys' locker room, or the nature of cyber crime, or children driven to suicide, or some of the portals which are extremely unnerving, emotionally unnerving, then where do you draw a line, no? As a person who has power? Means parents have power over children, and authorities have power over their employees or students.
Yeah, so we need to do a lot of research and, a lot of brainstorming to how to really go about all these issues, because there are cases coming to the courts, like like there was a school, a famous private school in Delhi, and where the two children, they made their video and then they uploaded on the marketing site, and the boy wants to earn money out of that, and then there's a whole case which went to the court. So these kind of things are happening, and we have to really do something to prevent,
Yeah.
help support women.
Yeah. So we are against moral policing, but at the same time, safety is a very important concern. I also had a dilemma when I was a member of hostel committee in SNDT Women's University. My feminism would come in a way of doing any kind of restriction on the girls, but at the same time, one knew the kind of things that happen in the streets of Mumbai, so we had to, like, so far as possible, we did not use any penalty or restriction, but explaining to them the dangers, and we are accountable to their parents also, because they are in the custody of the hostel committee.
Thank you so much, ma'am. The floor is now open to questions. Participants can do so by using the raise hand feature on Zoom, or leave it in the Q&A box.
There are no questions or comments in the chat box.
Oh, yes, ma'am. So if there are no more questions, then should we wrap today's session, ma'am?
Yes.
Alright.
I think today we had two very important presentations which gave us a lot of energy, and Dr. Shalu Nigam's legal hands-on also gave us made the cautionary guidelines it gave, that how do we cope with the new danger and new form of gender-based violence coming from the platform-based or internet or cyber technologies. I think when the theme of today's discussion is all successful intervention, and the question of accountability or coordinated efforts, building the leadership qualities among the women's movement or your organization, and also prevention of violence by hand-holding of a survivor to rebuild the shattered lives. So creation of an institutional structure. It's the wartime activity is petition and rallies and demonstrations and sit-in and dharna. But on a day-to-day basis to provide support to survivors of gender-based violence, I think it's very important to create those institutional structures, and then only we can ensure justice and safety and protection to those who are at the receiving end of the system. Now, another very important that what kind of responses do we give? And here I would like to say, because I think the questions raised by the participant is also about the how do we look at sex worker. In fact, we had a vertical split in the Bombay women's groups where nearly 14 community-based organizations, they supported rural women's organization which demanded ban on pair dancing. It was a rural versus urban fight also, where all the elected representatives and SHGs in the rural areas, they met the home minister demanding bar dancing. We had 94,000 women in Maharashtra who were dancers at bar. And the study which was done by Research Center for Women's Studies, supported by the feminists, they said it should be seen as a work. It is a question of livelihood. And then the women's movement was polarized. I think the same incident was repeated time and again about how do you look at the sex work or a commercialization of sex. There is a trend. There is a one stream which believes that it is a violence against women, and especially the child prostitution, where that should be seen as in the rubric of gender-based violence, while others, they said no, it is one of the options of work. And I think this is the global struggle also. Currently also a lot of debates are going on about so many Western countries who are now going for decriminalization of sex work, and by doing that, are we legitimizing sex work and seeing that because the neoliberalism and the new Industry 4.5 or Industry 5.0 is unable to is using patriarchal bias in not allowing women to be part of the workforce. They are suggesting that. So those kind of questionings are also happening. So it is not just NGOization, but it is also various way of the difference in the perspective of looking at women's sexuality, fertility, labor, and overall the double standard of sexual morality that we have in our society. And it is not only in India, it is all over the world. The question of support and healing, very important issues which have raised, that how we collectively create a support system where you get a community life, which I think it came out even from the Saumya's presentation. The women's movement has created this kind of safe spaces for women. The question of economic empowerment, extremely important. I won't say that it is an end in itself, but it is a minimum necessary condition to find alternatives in your life, no? And Dr. Keerthi also highlighted the question of research, information management, how to convert data into information and build advocacy campaign, and public interest litigation also becomes a very important tool in bringing transformative changes. I would like to end with one of the most popular songs, which was a group which was sung collectively in the rallies and demonstration, and it was written in Hindi by Sonal Shukla and Kushum Thakkar, veteran feminists of Mumbai, and it goes like this: we will fight, ahead we will go, against cruelty a new dawn to bring. Will we stay together so? Atrocities away we will wipe, rape afar we will drive, violence and beating to stop. Now we will strive. With unity will we destroy the reigns of foot and plunder. A new dawn to bring will we always stay together. Those who wish our movement to fail worry us with sticks and bullets and shackles and jail. If to face them today, we our strength gear, victory will be ours. For sure, for sure, for sure. लड़ेंगे हम, बढ़ेंगे हम, जुल्म के खिलाफ हम, नई सुबह लाने को चलेंगे साथ साथ हम. That was the song which was very popular during 80s and 1980s and 1990s. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for summarizing today's session. Should we move on to the vote of thanks?
Yes.
So as we come to an end of day 6 of Ending Gender-Based Violence, Cohort 2, Awareness of Policies and Governance, an online national spring school program, a 4-week online immersive certificate training course, I, Remat, researcher at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, New Delhi, would like to propose a formal vote of thanks on behalf of IMPRI Gender Impact Study Center. We are grateful to our experts for day 6, Professor Saumya Umaji, Dr. Keerthi Bollineni ji, and Advocate Dr. Shalu Nigam ji, for taking out their valuable time and allowing the participants to learn from this online certificate program. We thank all our participants who have raised pertinent questions and actively participated in today's deliberation. Readings for the session have been shared in your email, and a video of the session will also be shared for your learning. We look forward to welcoming you for our 7th day of the certification course. The theme for day 7 is collaborative approaches for ending gender-based violence, and the experts are Advocate Audrey De Mello ji, Ms. Nandini Sarkar ji, and Advocate Shalu Nigam ji. We are grateful if you're watching us later on YouTube or listening to us on our various podcasts or reading our publications. We hope you continue to join in future to our IMPRI Web Policy Talk and Web Policy Learning events. Wishing you a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ref.
Thank you.